Mr. Trump! Mr. Trump! The roaring crowd at the rally in Houston was deafening, thousands of supporters waving signs and chanting his name. The energy was electric until a piercing cry cut through the noise. Donald Trump, mid-sentence, faltered. His instinct was to power through, but something about the cry struck him. It wasn't the sound of an excited supporter or a protester trying to disrupt him. It was the unmistakable wail of a child. He scanned the crowd, squinting past the bright stage lights. Where was it coming from? Then he saw her, a little girl, no older than 7, sobbing into her hands. Her mother, a frazzled woman in a worn-out coat, tried to comfort her, but the child only cried harder. The Secret Service moved quickly, already anticipating trouble. One of them leaned in. "We can have them escorted out, sir." But Trump shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "Bring them up here." The crowd murmured, caught off guard. Some thought it was a distraction, others assumed it was part of the show, but no one expected what happened next. As the Secret Service cleared a path through the crowd, the little girl clutched her mother's hand tightly, her sobs quieter now, but still visible in the tremble of her small shoulders. The woman hesitated, looking at the agents with wide, uncertain eyes. Trump stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Come on up, sweetheart," he said, his voice softer than the usual rally tone. The mother, still unsure, lifted her daughter into her arms and made her way toward the stage. The crowd was silent now, waiting. Even the reporters, usually eager to twist every moment into controversy, seemed caught in the unexpected sincerity of the scene. When they finally reached the stage, Trump bent slightly, meeting the little girl's red, tear-streaked face at eye level. "Hey there, what's your name?" The child sniffled and glanced at her mother before whispering, "Emma." Trump nodded. "That's a beautiful name, Emma. What's wrong?" She hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "My daddy. He's gone." A heavy silence fell over the rally. Even the most passionate supporters in the crowd felt the weight of her words. Trump's expression changed, not the usual defiant smirk or confident grin, but something softer. "Gone?" he repeated gently. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Her mother stepped in, her voice shaking. Her father, he was a Marine. He died last year. The crowd gasped. People exchanged glances. Some placed hands over their hearts. Others muttered quiet prayers. Trump looked back at Emma, his eyes locked on hers. "Your dad was a hero," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "And I promise you, he will never be forgotten." He turned toward the audience, gripping the mic tightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for this little girl's father, a true American hero." The stadium erupted in applause. Some chanted, "USA! USA!" Others wiped their eyes. Even the most hardened critics in the media box seemed to pause, unsure of how to spin the moment. Trump turned back to Emma, then reached for something in his jacket pocket. Slowly he pulled out a small gold pin, one reserved for those who had served the nation. "This," he said, placing it in her tiny palm, "is a symbol of honor. Your dad earned this every single day he served this country, and now it's yours to remember him by." Emma stared at the pin, then at Trump. Her lip quivered, and without warning, she threw her little arms around him. The crowd gasped, cameras clicked, reporters whispered among themselves. And Donald Trump? For the first time in a long time, he stood still, letting the weight of the moment settle in. The embrace lasted only a few seconds, but to the thousands watching, both in the arena and on live broadcasts, it felt like time had frozen. Trump, usually commanding on stage, stood there, arms lightly wrapped around the grieving child, his expression unreadable. When Emma finally pulled away, she wiped her teary eyes and gave a small, shaky smile. The crowd had fallen into an unusual silence, absorbing the gravity of the moment. Then, like a slow-building wave, applause erupted, first in ripples, then a thunderous roar. People stood, clapping and cheering, not for politics, not for spectacle, but for something deeper. Emma's mother stepped forward, emotion thick in her voice. "Thank you," she whispered. Trump nodded, placing a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder before addressing the audience. "This little girl lost her father, but she didn't lose his legacy," he said, his voice strong, carrying across the stadium. "America stands because of men like him, and America will always stand for families like theirs." More cheers, more cameras flashing. But in the media box, journalists were scrambling, whispering urgently into their phones. Some were already typing articles, some looking for an angle, others realizing that this was a moment that couldn't be twisted. Just then, someone in the audience shouted, "What's her dad's name?" Trump turned back to Emma. "Sweetheart, would you like to share your dad's name?" She hesitated, then looked up and said, "Sergeant Daniel Carter." The arena erupted. "Sergeant Daniel Carter," Trump repeated, his voice filled with conviction. "A hero, a patriot, and a name we will never forget." The rally transformed into something more than politics. It was now a tribute, a moment of unity. Even those who disagreed with Trump politically couldn't deny the raw humanity of what had just unfolded. As Trump led the crowd into a moment of silence for Sergeant Carter, the cameras zoomed in on Emma, holding the golden pin tightly in her small hands. Unbeknownst to her, millions of Americans were watching. And many of them, whether they loved or hated Trump, felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The moment of silence ended, but its impact lingered. Trump gave Emma's shoulder one last reassuring squeeze before stepping back to the podium. The crowd was still electric, many wiping away tears, others chanting, "USA! USA! USA!" Behind the scenes, news networks scrambled to react. Some anchors sat stunned, others exchanged hurried glances as producers fed them updates through their earpieces. Inside a CNN studio, a visibly perplexed host adjusted his tie. We've just witnessed an unusual moment at a Trump rally," he said, his voice hesitant. "Former President Trump comforted a young girl who lost her father, a military hero. This is certainly not what anyone expected tonight." Over at Fox News, the reaction was different. "This is the leadership we've been talking about," the anchor declared. "Say what you will about Trump, but this moment, this was real, this was powerful." Social media was on fire. Trending topics: rocket ship, Trump and Emma fire, Sergeant Carter heart, Mon Chartier America unites. On Twitter, opinions clashed. Some praised Trump for showing compassion. Others accused him of staging the moment. Take Patriot Mom 45. Say what you want about Trump, but this right here is why he connects with real Americans. That little girl needed comfort, and he stepped up. Liberal Lion, 2024. So now he cares about the military? Convenient. This was nothing more than a photo op. But one tweet stood out above the rest. It was from Emma's mother. Lisa Carter, USA. To those saying this was staged, my daughter lost her father. She was heartbroken. Trump didn't have to do anything, but he did. And in that moment, he brought my little girl comfort. That's real. The tweet went viral. Back at the rally, Trump wasn't finished. He cleared his throat and addressed the audience again. "I want to do something," he said, voice firm. "We're going to make sure Sergeant Carter's sacrifice is never forgotten." He turned toward his staff at the edge of the stage. "Get in touch with the Carter family. We're setting up a scholarship in his name." The crowd erupted once more. Emma's mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Tears streamed down her face. The cameras caught every second, and just like that, the rally was no longer about politics. It was about a promise that would change lives. The stadium shook with applause as Trump's words hung in the air. The scholarship announcement was unexpected, spontaneous, but undeniably powerful. Even the most skeptical in the audience could feel the weight of the moment. Emma, still clutching her folded flag, looked up at Trump with wide eyes. You mean it?" she asked softly, her voice barely reaching his ears. Trump knelt slightly, bringing himself closer to her level. "Of course, sweetheart," he said. "Your dad was a hero. Heroes should never be forgotten." The crowd roared again, chants of "USA! USA!" filling the space like a battle cry. Lisa Carter, still overcome with emotion, stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Mr. Trump, I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Trump shook his head. "You don't have to. Your husband already gave more than anyone could ask." He then turned to his staff at the edge of the stage. "I want details on this scholarship by tomorrow morning," he ordered. "We'll work with the Carter family and make sure this happens." Aides scrambled into action, their phones buzzing as they relayed the message. The rally had turned into something completely different, a movement of remembrance, unity, and a tribute to a fallen hero. But outside the stadium, the media was in a frenzy. In New York, cable news hosts scrambled to adjust their narratives. The story had changed in an instant. At MSNBC, a skeptical anchor frowned at the screen. "Is this genuine compassion or just another political maneuver?" he asked, eyebrows raised. Over at Fox News, the tone was different. "This is leadership," the host declared. "This is why Trump resonates with the American people. He doesn't just talk, he acts." Meanwhile, social media was ablaze. The video of Emma hugging Trump had already hit 2 million views in under an hour. The most retweeted post? A side-by-side image of Trump and Emma with the caption, "Some things are bigger than politics." It was becoming clear this wasn't just a rally anymore. It was a moment that would be remembered. And for Trump, it was only the beginning. As Trump stepped off the stage, he was met with a mix of admiration and skepticism. His closest advisors, including Hope Hicks and Stephen Miller, walked briskly beside him, their expressions unreadable. "That was unexpected," Hicks finally said, her voice measured. Trump nodded, adjusting his red tie. "Yeah, well, sometimes you just go with the moment." Miller, ever the strategist, leaned in. "Sir, this is going to dominate the news cycle for days. The left will spin it, but the people? They'll see the real you." Trump smirked. "Let them try. The people saw what happened tonight." Meanwhile, in the press room, journalists scrambled to rewrite their stories. The narrative they'd prepared, another typical campaign rally, had been shattered. At CNN, a frustrated producer barked orders. "We need a new angle. Get me an expert to talk about the politics of emotional manipulation." At the Daily Wire, a conservative commentator grinned. "This is what leadership looks like." Back at the rally, Lisa Carter wiped away fresh tears as reporters swarmed her. "Mrs. Carter, how do you feel about what just happened?" one journalist asked. She held Emma close, took a breath, and answered, "I don't care what anyone says. Tonight my husband was honored. That's all that matters." By the time Trump woke up the next morning, his phone was buzzing non-stop. He scrolled through Twitter, watching the explosion of reactions. "Trump honors heroes" was trending nationwide. A clip of him kneeling beside Emma had hit 10 million views overnight. Pundits on both sides debated whether the moment was genuine or staged. Trump tossed his phone onto the desk and turned to his chief of staff, Mark Meadows. "What's the word?" he asked. Meadows exhaled. "You broke the internet, sir. The left is trying to undermine it, but the public response is overwhelmingly positive." Trump leaned back in his chair, a satisfied grin forming. "Good. Let's keep it that way." But outside the White House, forces were already moving. The opposition wasn't going to let this moment pass without a fight. And Trump? He was ready for whatever came next. The morning headlines were relentless. Trump's rally stunt, genuine or political theater? CNN, Donald Trump exploits grieving widow for sympathy. MSNBC, a moment of true leadership, Trump honors a hero. Fox News. Across networks, analysts dissected every second of the emotional exchange. Some called it a calculated move to soften Trump's image. Others hailed it as one of the most human moments of his presidency. In the White House Situation Room, a heated discussion was underway. "Mr. President, the media is trying to spin this against you," Hope Hicks said, placing a stack of reports on the table. "They're questioning whether Lisa Carter was planted at the rally." Trump scoffed, flipping through the papers. "Planted? Are these people insane?" Stephen Miller nodded. "Sir, the Democrats are panicking. They didn't expect this. Your approval ratings among independents just shot up by 6 points overnight." Trump smirked. "Of course they did." "But," Miller continued, "they won't stop here. They'll try to dig up anything on Lisa Carter. If she has so much as a late parking ticket, they'll use it." Trump tapped his fingers on the table, deep in thought. "Then we get ahead of them. Bring Lisa in. I want to talk to her personally." Lisa Carter sat in her small apartment, staring at the flood of messages on her phone. Some were kind, strangers thanking her for sharing her husband's story. Others were cruel, calling her a Trump pawn, or worse. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, a sharply dressed man stood there. "Mrs. Carter," he said, flashing a White House ID. "The president would like to see you." Lisa hesitated, glancing back at Emma, who was coloring on the couch. "It's important," the aide added. She took a deep breath. "Give me 5 minutes." Lisa sat across from Trump, unsure what to expect. "Lisa," Trump started, his tone unusually soft. "I don't know what these people are saying about you, but I want you to know. You're not alone in this." Lisa blinked back tears. "I never expected all this attention." Trump leaned forward. "You shared your story, and it mattered. But the media, the swamp, they'll try to tear you down for it." Lisa nodded. "I've already seen it." Trump nodded, glancing at Hope Hicks. "We're going to support you, Lisa. Whatever you need. Protection, legal counsel, anything. You tell us." Lisa hesitated for only a moment before answering. "Just make sure my husband's name is never forgotten." Trump met her gaze, determination burning in his eyes. "That, Lisa, I can promise you." The media storm showed no signs of slowing down. Every major outlet ran opinion pieces dissecting the rally moment and Lisa Carter's story. Some headlines were scathing. "Trump uses military widow for political gain." The New York Times. "The manufactured tears of Lisa Carter." The Huffington Post. Others painted a different picture. "Trump's unscripted moment of compassion changes everything." The Daily Caller. "A president who listens, Trump's emotional exchange goes viral." Breitbart. Meanwhile, social media exploded. The hashtag number Trump cares began trending, with supporters praising his reaction. At the same time, charges staged by Trump trended alongside it, with skeptics accusing him of orchestrating the moment for political advantage. At a morning staff meeting, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany laid out the situation. "They're trying to spin it against you, Mr. President," she said, placing a tablet on the Resolute desk. "But public opinion is split. Independents are moved by the moment. The left is calling it an act. The right sees it as proof of your leadership." Trump leaned back in his chair, watching the news clips play in silence. Then he smirked. "They're giving me free airtime," he said. "Let them talk." Hope Hicks nodded. "We should take this further, sir. The media won't stop digging into Lisa Carter, but we can flip the script. Turn this into something bigger. Trump raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We highlight fallen soldiers, not just Lisa's husband. We make this about every family who's made the ultimate sacrifice. Turn this moment into a movement. Trump drummed his fingers on the desk. A full-scale event, televised, live. I'll personally honor military families. Show America that we don't just talk, we act. Stephen Miller leaned forward. We can call it America's Heroes, honoring the fallen. Trump grinned. Perfect. Let's do it. Back at her apartment, Lisa Carter sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through the flood of messages. Some were supportive, but the hate was overwhelming. She hesitated before opening the latest email. From the White House subject. A special invitation from the president. Her hands trembled as she read. Lisa, the president is hosting a special event to honor fallen soldiers and their families. He wants you there. Please let us know if you're willing to speak. Lisa's heart pounded. She wasn't a public speaker. She was a mother, a widow trying to survive. But then she looked across the room, at the framed photo of her husband in uniform, holding baby Emma in his arms. Her decision was clear. She picked up her phone and called the White House. I'll do it. The White House wasted no time. Within days, plans were set for a grand event at the Lincoln Memorial, America's Heroes, honoring the fallen. It was to be a prime-time, televised special, bringing together Gold Star families, military veterans, and active duty service members. The goal was clear. Shift the narrative and show the world that Donald Trump truly cared about the sacrifices made for America. As the sun set over Washington, D.C., the event grounds were packed. Massive American flags waved behind the stage, illuminated by golden floodlights. Rows of seats were filled with families who had lost loved ones in service, their faces a mix of grief and pride. The media was out in full force, ready to capture every moment. Backstage, Lisa Carter stood clutching a small note card. She had spent the last 3 nights preparing what she would say, but now, as she looked at the sea of cameras and people, her confidence wavered. A voice broke through her thoughts. You ready? She turned to see Trump standing beside her, adjusting his tie. His usual bravado was absent. He looked serious, maybe even nervous. Lisa took a deep breath. I think so. Trump nodded. You're gonna do great. Just speak from the heart. A moment later, the MC announced her name. The crowd applauded as she stepped onto the stage, her heels clicking against the polished floor. As she faced the audience, her hands trembled slightly, but she stood tall. My name is Lisa Carter, she began, and I am the widow of Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter. The crowd fell silent. Lisa took a shaky breath. I never thought I'd be standing here. I never thought I'd be telling my husband's story in front of the whole country. But then, something happened. Something I never expected. She glanced at Trump, who was seated nearby, watching intently. I met the President of the United States. Not in a meeting room, not in a political setting, but in a crowd, at a rally, where I was just another face in the crowd. And in that moment, he didn't see me as a voter or as a symbol. He saw me as a grieving wife, a struggling mother, a person. A hush fell over the audience. Even some of the journalists, poised with their pens and cameras, lowered their hands. He listened to me, Lisa continued. He held my daughter in his arms. He made me feel seen, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. Tears welled in her eyes. She turned to the families seated behind her. To every family sitting here tonight, every mother, father, spouse, and child who has lost someone in service, I know your pain. I carry it too. But we are not forgotten. We are not alone. and we will never stop honoring their sacrifice." The crowd erupted in applause. Some stood. Others wiped tears from their eyes. Then Lisa turned to Trump. "Mr. President, thank you." Trump stood, walked to her side, and shook her hand. Then, in a move that surprised even his own advisers, he pulled her into a hug. The image flashed across every television screen in America. The moment had become bigger than politics. It had become personal. The night's event was a massive success. Social media exploded with praise and debate. Clips of Lisa Carter's speech and Trump's emotional embrace flooded every news outlet. Even some of his staunchest critics admitted that for once, the moment felt real, unscripted, and deeply human. But behind the scenes, not everyone was celebrating. Inside a dimly lit boardroom in a Manhattan high-rise, a group of men and women sat in silence, watching the event replay on a large screen. The room reeked of expensive cigars and old money. A man in his 60s, dressed in an impeccable black suit, leaned forward and tapped the remote, pausing the video on Trump's embrace with Lisa Carter. "This," he said, his voice cold, "is a problem." A younger man, wearing thin-framed glasses, nodded. "We underestimated him. Again." The older man scoffed. "No, we underestimated the power of perception. The media was supposed to bury him after the scandals last month. But this?" He pointed to the screen. "This makes him look untouchable." A woman in a navy blue blazer adjusted her earpiece. "The polls are shifting. This event gave him a 5-point boost overnight. If this continues—" The older man cut her off. "Then we make sure it doesn't." Silence filled the room. A younger, ambitious-looking strategist leaned in. "Sir, are you suggesting—" The older man smirked. "Let's just say, it's time to remind the public of his flaws." Trump sat in the Oval Office, still dressed in his suit from the event, scrolling through Twitter. For the first time in months, the feed was filled with positivity. Messages of support flooded in, along with stories from other Gold Star families who finally felt heard. Ivanka entered the room, a soft smile on her face. "Dad, I think you did something incredible tonight." Trump looked up, his expression unreadable. "Yeah? You think so?" "I know so," she said. "Lisa's story, what you did for her, it's bigger than politics." He leaned back in his chair. "The media's already picking it apart, though. You know how this works. They'll turn it into something else by tomorrow." Ivanka hesitated. "Maybe. But for now, people are seeing the side of you they don't always get to see." Trump exhaled, rubbing his chin. "Let's hope it lasts." He didn't have to wait long. By morning, the headlines had already shifted. Trump's heartfelt moment was staged, claims anonymous source. Investigative report. Did the White House orchestrate the Lisa Carter encounter? Gold Star families speak out. Not everyone feels heard. Trump slammed his phone on the resolute desk. "Are you kidding me?" Hope Hicks walked in, looking concerned. "It's coordinated." Trump narrowed his eyes. "By who?" "We're working on that," she said. "But it's clear someone doesn't want this moment to stick." Trump clenched his jaw. He wasn't surprised, but it still angered him. The moment had been real. Lisa Carter had been real. And now someone was trying to erase it. He leaned forward. "Find out who's behind it." Hope nodded and walked out, already making calls. Trump stared at his reflection in the window, his mind racing. The event was supposed to be a turning point. Instead, it had become the opening move in a new war. It didn't take long for Trump's team to uncover the truth. The coordinated media blitz against him came from a surprising source, one of his closest political allies. Hope Hicks paced back and forth in Trump's private office, her face a mix of frustration and disbelief. "We've traced the leak," It's coming from inside the administration. Trump's eyes narrowed. Who? It's Senator Randall Davis, she said, her voice low. He's been in talks with certain media outlets, planting stories, suggesting that the Lisa Carter moment was engineered for political gain. He's been feeding them information for weeks. Trump's fists clenched at his sides. Senator Randall Davis, the same man who had praised his leadership just a few months ago, sitting front and center at every rally. He felt the sting of betrayal deeper than he expected. Why the hell would he do this? Trump muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Hope's gaze turned cold. He's working with a group of donors who are trying to shift the political narrative. They think you're not electable for 2024 unless you focus on policy, not these emotional moments. Trump's jaw tightened. So, they're trying to erase a moment that matters, just so they can manipulate the next election? Hope nodded. Exactly. Trump stared out the window, his mind running through every political maneuver he had ever made. He had faced enemies outside his circle before, but this felt different. This was someone who had been inside his inner circle. Someone he trusted. Determined not to let this go, Trump made a phone call. "Randall," he said when the senator picked up, "we need to talk." "I don't know what you're talking about, Donald," Davis replied, his voice cool but hiding the tension. "Don't play games with me, Randall. I know what you've been doing," Trump shot back. "You've been trying to tear down a moment that mattered to me, to the American people. Why?" There was a pause, a heavy silence on the other end. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about what mattered to you. It's about winning. You can't keep doing these feel-good speeches, these moments with families. It's not enough. You need policy, Donald. Real, hard policy." Trump's frustration grew. "You think the country's going to forget what happened in that rally, what Lisa Carter said? You think the American people care about policy more than human connection? You're wrong." "Maybe," Davis said, his voice softening. "But it's too late for you to change now. They'll forget about you." Trump gritted his teeth, his mind racing with anger. "I don't forget. I don't forgive. And you'll regret this." The line went dead. By the time Trump hung up the phone, he was already plotting his next move. He had one opportunity to make the world see the truth and to expose Senator Randall Davis for what he was, a puppet for the establishment, out for his own gain. He called his press team. "Get me a live feed for tomorrow. We're going public." The plan was simple. He would turn the tables on Davis and expose the hypocrisy for all to see. Trump knew it was risky, but what good was politics without a fight? At the same time, Hope Hicks was reaching out to reporters she trusted, feeding them evidence of Davis's behind-the-scenes dealings. The media storm was about to hit, but this time, Trump would be the one controlling the narrative. The next day, Trump stepped up to the podium at a rally in Ohio, the crowd buzzing with excitement. But there was something different in the air. He had an agenda. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today not to talk about policy. I'm here to talk about betrayal," he said, his voice sharp and commanding. The crowd fell silent. Trump's gaze swept over the sea of faces. "You all saw the moment I shared with Lisa Carter, the Gold Star mother who spoke about her son's sacrifice. That moment wasn't about me. It wasn't about politics. It was about humanity." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But some people in this country don't want you to believe that. They want to tell you that it was staged. They want to tear it down because it makes them uncomfortable. Why? Because they can't control it." Trump's eyes flashed with intensity as he dropped the bombshell. "There's a man I trusted, a man who stood by me, Senator Randall Davis. He's been working with powerful donors to destroy that moment and everything it represents. Why? Because they think I'm a threat to their power." The crowd gasped, and a few murmurs spread. Trump held up a piece of paper. Here's the evidence right from his camp. He's been feeding the media false information to discredit me. And why? Because they want to control your vote. They want to control your emotions." The reporters in the back of the room scribbled furiously. "I'm not here to play games," Trump continued, his voice growing stronger. "I'm here to expose the truth. And the truth is, people like Randall Davis don't care about the American people. They care about power. And when someone speaks the truth, they'll do whatever it takes to silence them." The crowd erupted into applause. Trump stepped back from the podium, letting the moment linger in the air. This battle wasn't over yet, but at least now the American people had the truth. Within hours, the news media was in a frenzy. The story of Trump exposing Randall Davis went viral. But as the headlines spread, so did a deeper story. Trump wasn't just fighting against Davis. He was fighting against the system that had tried to crush his moment of human connection with Lisa Carter. Davis denied the allegations, but the damage was done. The public now saw him as a puppet, and Trump's decision to go public had humanized him even further. It wasn't just about policy anymore, it was about standing up for what was right. The press shifted its focus. Now it was Trump versus the establishment, and the people were watching closely. The media frenzy around Trump's exposure of Senator Randall Davis was more intense than anyone could have anticipated. The headlines were everywhere. "Trump unmasks betrayal," "Senator Davis betrays the American people," and "Trump takes a stand for the truth." Even late-night talk show hosts couldn't resist taking jabs at the situation, but there was one thing that couldn't be ignored. Trump had successfully shifted the conversation. The next morning, Trump stood at his desk in the Oval Office, deep in thought. The phone rang. It was Hope Hicks. "Donald?" Hope's voice was urgent. "The polls are shifting. Davis's approval ratings are plummeting. The donors are scrambling, but they don't know how to control the narrative now. It's all in your hands." Trump smiled slightly, though his eyes were cold. "I told them this would happen. I said they can't manipulate the truth forever, but it's far from over." As Trump looked at the news on his television, he noticed something different. There was a sudden surge of support on social media. The hashtag #Truth over power was trending. People weren't just defending Trump, they were condemning the actions of the political elite who had tried to undermine him. The voice of the people was louder than ever before. Hope's voice returned to his mind as he walked to the window. "It's not just about Davis anymore, Donald. It's about standing up for the little guy, for the people who are tired of being lied to. This is your moment." Trump turned to her with a determined look. "I know what I have to do. It's time to take this fight to the next level." Trump knew that exposing Davis was only the first step. If he wanted to win this battle and the upcoming election, he would have to go deeper. The following evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Trump was getting ready for another rally. He was in the heart of Pennsylvania, a key battleground state, and the crowd was expected to be massive. But this rally would be different. Trump had a new target. As he took the stage, he immediately sensed the energy in the room. It was electric. People were chanting his name, waving signs, and the air felt thick with anticipation. He could feel the shift. The people were ready for change, but what came next would change everything. Trump began by acknowledging the past few days. "You've all heard the stories. You've seen the headlines. You know what happened with Senator Davis. But what you don't know is why they tried to take me down." The crowd went silent, hanging on his every word. He continued, "It's not just about politics. It's about power. People like Randall Davis want to control you, the people, and use you as pawns. But what they didn't count on was the truth that can never be silenced." Trump's voice grew more powerful as he spoke. "And let me tell you, I'm not the only one they've been trying to silence. They've been doing this to the American people for years. But I'm here to fight back. I'm here to expose the whole system, the corrupt politicians, the dishonest media, and the elite who think they can control us. The crowd erupted into applause, but Trump wasn't done yet. You all know the story about the child I saw at my rally, the one who was crying because of what's happening in this country. That child represented every family in America who feels ignored, who feels like no one listens. But I'm here to say, I'm listening. I'm fighting for you. The crowd cheered louder than ever. But Trump had one last thing to say. You know why I'm here? Because I will never back down. And together we will fight for every child in this country, for every family, for the forgotten men and women who have been lied to for years. And we will win this fight, because the truth will always prevail. Trump's speech sent shockwaves through the political world. Within hours, social media was flooded with reactions, supporters flooding the hashtags with messages of solidarity, and critics scrambling to find ways to discredit him. But this time, it was different. The media tried to spin the story, but the public wasn't buying it. Trump had exposed something bigger than Davis. He had exposed a system that prioritized power over people, and the American people were beginning to see it. Trump's rallies were now more than just political events. They had become movements. His supporters were not just cheering for him, they were cheering for a cause, the cause of truth, the cause of standing up against the elites who had controlled the narrative for far too long. And Trump, the outsider, was leading the charge. As the rally ended and the crowd began to disperse, Trump knew that this fight was far from over. He had made his move, and the world was watching. But he was ready for whatever came next. He was no longer just fighting for political power. He was fighting for the truth. And that, he knew, was something no one could take away from him. The days following Trump's rally were filled with a mix of chaos and optimism. The media machine was working overtime, attempting to discredit him, but the truth had already planted its seed in the hearts of millions of Americans. As the weeks passed, Trump's approval ratings continued to rise, and the support from his base became undeniable. Social media was flooded with messages from everyday citizens who were finally waking up to the reality of what was happening behind closed doors in Washington. For the first time in a long time, people felt empowered, like their voices were actually being heard. But even as momentum built in Trump's favor, he knew there was still work to be done. The establishment wasn't going to just sit back and let him dismantle everything they'd worked so hard to create. The real battle, the one for the soul of the country, was just beginning. It wasn't long before Trump received word of a new threat. A covert campaign to undermine his campaign through fake news and manipulated information. The shadowy figures behind this new operation were ruthless, pulling every string they could to stifle the movement that Trump had ignited. Late one evening, Trump sat in his private office at Mar-a-Lago, his face illuminated by the soft glow of his desk lamp. Hope Hicks walked in, her expression grave. "Donald, we've just received intel. There's a coordinated effort to smear you across all major news networks. They're pulling out all the stops, trying to discredit everything you've built." Trump stood up, his fists clenched. "I knew this day would come. They think they can stop me, but they don't understand who they're dealing with." He paced back and forth, his mind racing. "We need to take the fight straight to them. We need to expose them for what they are, liars, manipulators, the true enemies of the people." Hope nodded. "And how do you plan to do that?" Trump paused, his eyes flashing with determination. "It's time we use their playbook against them. We need to show the world the truth, and I'm not just talking about Washington. I'm talking about the media, the power brokers who've been pulling the strings for decades. It's time they answer for their corruption." Stay tuned for part 2.